is to say and I pray this in Jesus' name.
I just want to say thanks for letting me speak on Father's Day. Probably were expecting some old stately gentleman to give you a wise word, but I just appreciate it. But seeing as that's it's Father's Day, I just wanted to give a round of applause for all of our dads out there. Really hard job. My dad had an especially hard job with me, so just want to appreciate it. But seeing as it's Father's Day, I just thought it would be fun to start out with something a little humorous. But these are 7 things you will never hear your dad say. Starting at number 7. I notice all your friends have a hostile attitude. I like that. Number 6. Well, now you're 13, princess. I want you to start dating. No son of mine is going to live under this roof without an earring. Why do you want to get a job? I got plenty of money for you to spend. Your mother and I are going out for the weekend. You might want to consider having your friends over and throw a party. Here's my credit card and the keys to my car, and I'll go crazy. And number 1 is, well, like, looks like I'm lost. I guess I'll have to stop and ask for directions. So, we're getting serious here. As children, as I'm thinking about this Father's Day message, I just thought about as children, we've all kind of blown it, haven't we? We all remember times when we have let our parents down and disappointed them. And I think it's the eyes of disappointment when you don't live up to your parents' expectations that are often the hardest and the most impactful moments in those circumstances. But as I reflect on that, you know what the most common thing in each of those moments was that my parents didn't give up on me, and they didn't give up on you either. And this morning we're going to cover the father heart of God towards us. Over the course of my adult life, I've discovered how important it is to truly understand what we believe as Christians. Because when you truly understand what you believe, there is little doubt. When it comes to Christians, we often say the phrase God the Father within everyday expressions of our faith. We say this phrase in songs, prayers, sermons, and thanking the Lord for those delicious potluck breakfasts. But God the Father, don't we say that phrase often? Today I want to explore what it truly means for God to be our Father. Both the Old Testament and New Testament have great insight to help us as Christians understand this intimate side of God towards us. Now, children are prone to wander, and even in my adult years, I still let my parents down and disappoint them. Parents always have an expectation for their children to act and to grow up in a certain way. I remember being a young child and always finding a way to accidentally wander off on myself and the rest of the family. I never meant to make my parents have a heart attack or freak out. I just loved exploring and seeing what's around the next corner. I still have a hard time sitting still. There's just something about the old saying, the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, that rings some true as something outstandingly attractive to me. So when my parents do find me, do they get mad at me? Most times. Parents want their kids to be safe and secure. They know the dangers of what's around the next corner. We live in a world full of danger and horrible encounters. But I am the type that will not learn a hard lesson until I've experienced the reasons why something is deemed a hard lesson. In other words, I need to truly fail in order for me to fully understand why something is deemed a bad decision. This way of understanding of the world around me has not always been easy for my mom and my dad to handle. And I have a feeling I'm not the only one who deals with that. Now, church, Israel was God's child. And like any dad, he had expectations for his children to act and to follow. And they acted like children at the best of times. Like me, they loved to wander. Their hearts were prone to wander away from the commands of God. Church, we all have a rebellious side to us. And how easy it is to read the story of the Israelites and say, I'm not that bad. But the truth is, as soon as we have enforcing rules, I just want to stop here, but at Bethany Bible College, there was a curfew of 12 o'clock midnight. Everyone has to be in their rooms. And even though I was tired at 10:30 and I should have went to bed, there was always something attractive about putting a rock in the door and then going up to Tim Hortons and getting coffee at like 12:30 at night. I don't know why, but there's something when you have strict rules, we always want to break them. And I don't know why, but it's just our sinful nature and we always have to battle with that. So when we have boys and girls, our sinful nature often takes over. We all have a bent for evil, no matter how perfect and innocent you may feel you are. And you may even think that the sermon has nothing to do with you this morning. But I will assure you that every single one of us in this room this morning have encountered the rebellious side of our hearts at one time or another. And I will not shy away from saying how rebellious I truly am. When my parents say make your bed every morning, it's always a fight, and I don't know why, but it just is. And it's not done this morning. Wow. I always rush. What? Yeah, I have to learn this teacher. So it doesn't matter how many rules we have. We will always find a way to break them, if not consciously, then subconsciously, because that's our sinful nature that we are dealing with, church. And although my parents couldn't have a watchful eye on me all the times, even though they wished they could, God always has a watchful eye on us. There's a saying that I've encountered growing up. It's not illegal unless you get caught. And how many of us have heard this saying before? Well, we must understand this, friends. God is always watching. Even though your parents might not have a watchful eye on you at all the times, God is watching. Yet the Israelites lived like God couldn't see what they were really up to. Unlike most parents who can't realistically have their eyes on their children at all times, God is a great Father who prides himself on doing just that. And like any good dad, God desired to make sure that his children were safe. And the truth is, children don't really know what's around the corner. That's part of the attraction to it. But the children of Israel did. God told them through the prophets what was around the corner. They had no excuse for their wandering. They always seemed to have a lust for more and more of what the world around them had to offer. Like children, the sense of exploration never left them. What they were saying to God was that what he had to offer them was not enough. That following him wasn't enough of an adventure and as exciting as they desired. They allowed the rebellious sides of their heart to take over. God, being their Father, brought correction when the Israelites decided to turn from the plan God had for them. Correcting your children is not a bad thing. The Bible actually says that loving parents correct their children, not just to go along with their faults and failures like it's cool and you want to relate to your children, but to correct them, because that's the role of the dad, correct? Amen, church? Now, when the Israelites did decide to wander away from the plans of God that God had for them, God sent the prophets to speak to them, hoping they would return back to God. And this morning, I want to focus on two particular passages. The first is found in Jeremiah 4:1. And it's going to be up on the screen. Okay, let's read this together. If you will return, O Israel, then return to me, declares the Lord. If you put away your detestable idols and no longer go astray. What? Sorry. God was just being a loving Father. In reading around the context of this passage, God was really, really trying to bring Israel back to their senses. Often in our wandering and sin, we can't begin to see the destructive path our sin has caused until something awakens us to the reality of our situation. We're just going to keep reading. If you return, O Israel, return to me, declares the Lord. If you put your detestable idols out of my sight and no longer go astray, and if in a truthful and just and righteous way you swear, as surely as the Lord lives, then the nations will be blessed by him, and in him This is what the Lord says to the men of Judah and to Jerusalem. Break up your unplowed ground, and do not sow among thorns. Circumcise yourselves to the Lord. Circumcise your hearts, you men of Judah and people of Jerusalem, or my wrath will break out and burn like fire because of the evil you have done. Burn with no condemnation. It's kind of a hard message that Jeremiah gave the people of Israel. But you know what, friends? I'm not here to birth a seed of defeat, but that of hope. God didn't say to Israel that he was giving up on them by any chance. He was simply letting them know what their conduct and actions would eventually lead to. They brought it on themselves. Later on in chapter 4 of Jeremiah, we read a particular verse that speaks into this very thing. Verse 18 says, "Your conduct and actions have brought this upon yourselves. This is your punishment, how bitter it is, how it pierces the heart." I believe that at the heart of every father is the desire for their wayward child to come home and come back to their senses. Sometimes parents speak to their children out of a sense of desperation. All a parent wants for their child is to be safe and to be out of danger. And often parents can see the path of the road of danger before we as children even see it. God sees the past, the present, and the future of our lives. He alone can lead us along the right path if we let him. Amen, church? Amen. The message of coming back to God the Father is not a message birthed of anger, but of love. True love does not have to yell and scream to get their way. We read a unique story found in the book of 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 11 to 13. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord wasn't in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When true love is at work, there is no need to raise your voice to get what you want. If a person's heart does not truly want to change, then no amount of yelling or screaming will change that. God doesn't want to scream at us, nor will he. God the Father simply leads us along by his peace and his gentle love and whisper. He may not have yelled to the Israelites, but he did speak and correct. And he warned them what their conduct and actions will lead to. Church, sin always has a price. Wandering always costs us something. And sin and wandering will always bring us further than we wish to ever go. You know, so often in my life, church, I've wondered why God let me wander away from him. But truthfully, I ignored the warning signs. I knew better, but seared my conscience so hard that I was still able to keep walking and wandering into areas I knew enough not to go in the first place. You can use excuses like, I'm an adventurous person for only so long before you eventually have to deal with the consequences of your sin and wandering. You know, I've tried to walk away from God in my teens. I tried everything. I thought that everything else but God would make me happy. The guilt and the shame I felt during those wandering times overwhelmed me and kept me from coming back home to God's safety and forgiveness for his sake. Yet through that shame and the guilt, God's relentless love pursued me and welcomed me back home. Despite what I've done, my story has a lot of similar tones to the parable Jesus spoke of in Luke 15, 11 to 32. Now this parable found in this passage focuses on the character and the nature of God himself. It's usually called the parable of the prodigal son, but really, it's also a parable of a loving dad. Jesus uses this story to teach us about the character and the nature of his Father. It's imperative, church, to understand the God in which we serve. And to know which God you serve, it is imperative to describe the attributes of the God we serve. You know what God is like by how he responds to a rebellious son in this parable. It's a good illustration. In this story, there was a son who came from a wealthy family. They had a beautiful farm and a safe and fun environment to grow up in. Now each son was allotted an inheritance from his father. One day, this one son heard a rumor of a distant country filled with parties and fun and more excitement than one person could dream. So one day, the son got the idea to ask for his inheritance early and head to the distant country. It was more than just attractive, it soon became a reality for him. So the father consented and gave his son a portion of his inheritance. And so that was it. The son left for the long journey to this dream distant country. As he got there, he quickly began to indulge in the wild living. Quickly spending all of his money, he desired to keep up the wild living, so he found himself a job. But the only job available for this son was that of a pig handler. This job was dirty and hard, and quickly he discovered that he was hungry and starving. Even the pigs ate more than him. And so it happened, friends. The aha moment when the lights turned on, he gave up everything he knew for this. This was the awakening moment for that son. The moment when he truly discovered what his wanderings cost him. He was starving and thirsty, lonely and downright dirty. The shame and guilt he must have felt, friends. But I was there too, and many of us are here today because we too have felt that shame, that same feeling. We almost lost everything, but we are here because our story didn't end in the pig pen.
And a lot of us been to the pig pen.
Yeah.
Several times.
Yeah.
What we read next is, in this story, is a person's journey to recovery.
Your tears are there for exactly the right reason. You're right up there where you belong.
But he brought himself out of that big pen through self-realization and started the journey back. You know, I can just imagine the shame he must have felt. First, he lived wild life, that filled with the nightlife. And there was a personal compromise there, one with lasting repercussions. And now he's out of his inheritance too. What is he supposed to do when he retires? He wants to settle down. Bet you he didn't really think of that a whole lot. So as he approached his homestead, I wondered what was going through his head. Wow, I really blew it this time. How is he ever going to trust me again? What am I going to say to him? You know what Dad said? He said, walk home. And you know what? He threw him a party. And he didn't just say, welcome home, he threw him a party. A huge party at that. And you see, the dad was hoping that the son would return. And Pastor Paul, he was telling me, I actually didn't catch this, but he was waiting for his son. You know, he was hoping that the son would return. And he saw him off in the distance and already started the party. And when he did, he saw the biggest party there was. You know, often as Christians, we don't get what we deserve. And that's what grace is there for. The son should have expected words like failure, disappointment. But he just simply received open arms. In this parable, we read a story of grace. And people are never beyond repair. And you can never run too far away from God's will and His love to rescue you. You know, Jesus was exposing His heart for Israel to return. Even though they were very religious people, they had all the right motives, and their hearts were still far from God. And this son who ran far from home came from a great home filled with riches and comfort, and he still wanted more. And that's the rebellious side where it was dealing with. Often we run far from what we know to be true and right, yet we see God's heart for us even despite that. God says, I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you. And we truly believe that. I think we live our faith a little differently. We can find all the love and support our hearts desires within this relentless, patient, and kind love of God the Father. No matter the hurt and disappointment you may have experienced here in your time on earth, you can always trust the love of God the Father. I'm not ignoring the fact that some of us have had bad experiences where we did not have the loving and caring Father that we had hoped for. For some of us here, trusting a father figure in your life can bring about memories and feelings that are anything but pleasant this morning. Although your earthly dad may have failed you, God the Father will never fail you. You can never, and I mean never, do anything that will turn God's heart away from you. And you know what? It's hard, and the reason why I'm crying this morning is because I've done so many stupid things, church. And I don't know why God hasn't given up on me. You are precious, and you make God the Father smile. He loves you when you're happy and blessed, because He loves you with an unconditional love this morning. A part of that love is not simply looking past your faults and your failures, but showing you the right path, because He is a good dad. I used to yell at God when He corrected me, but I've discovered that true love corrects. True love helps one another discover the right path. We shouldn't simply look past the faults of our children, because that wouldn't be true love. Jesus never did that with us. He took on our faults and our failures upon Himself, because He wanted to show us the greatest expression of love itself. Can you run away from God's plan? Absolutely. Can you purposely stay in that distant country, yet know the truth? Absolutely. Otherwise, why would God put these stories in the Bible in the first place? And you may be thinking today, I, for one, am tired of living in that distant country and sitting in a pig pen. I know better and I want to come home. And if that's you this morning, turn your heart to God. He's here for you. Now, what do we do about our thoughts, about what our Heavenly Father will say when we return back to Him? Dismiss them, they are all lies. What Satan wants is for you to stay in that pig pen and to stay in that shame and that guilt, weighed down by the feelings of worthlessness and beyond repair. Your past is your past. You can't change what happened, but God, by His infinite mercy, displayed on that cross, can look past our past and welcome us home. You know, sometimes we think we failed God. I mean, how can God look at me the same after what I've done? But the fact is, church, is that if that were the case, faith would cease to exist among us. If God only loved us based on our good behavior, then we would have all been abandoned long ago. Yet we are all still here. We are all still loved. Take, for example, my parents. I have messed up so many times. They probably should have kicked me out of the house by now. That probably would have lowered their stress level just a bit. But yet, despite their disappointment sometimes in me, they never stopped loving me. Despite being completely senseless at times, they have never thought of giving up on me. So why do we think that God will ever give up on us? Do we truly believe that He's our Heavenly Dad? If so, you can trust Him enough to believe that He won't abandon you. We can believe this truth this morning. Though the mountains be shaken and the hills be removed, yet my unfailing love for you will not be shaken, nor my covenant of peace be removed, says the Lord who has compassion on you. And you know, when you become a Christian, so often you think that your life will be perfect, that when you're forgiven for something you've done, but God often lets us wander from time to time. And in that wandering, does He ever stop loving us? Absolutely not. But He does call us home. We serve a patient God. And although our earthly parents may fall short of being all loving, all patient, God never fails in these areas. He doesn't shout nor forces us to come home. But He is waiting for us with open arms, ready to love us. Yeah. Or we're just going to pray for Deb McComsky. God, being a loving Father that you are, you care about even the small things. And I just want to lift up Deb McComsky this morning. And pray that you just have your healing hand upon her. And the cataract that's in her eye. And I just pray that God, you would boost her faith. Show her that she is not abandoned this morning, that you care about us. My good dad will do anything for their children. I pray that God would be a good dad for her this morning. I pray, amen.
I just have one small story to share. Is this on, Brayden? Is this on?
Oh, sorry.
I just have a small story I just wanted to share while Wes was up here preaching. I've known Wes since he was a little boy, and I had a vision of him on one Halloween when he used to have Halloween with the biggest party at the church. And Wes walked in the door and he had a full armor on. He had a sword, he had a shield, he had the helmet, and he was really proud just because this whole costume on. And I have movies of it actually. And Wes, when you're standing up there, that uniform hasn't left you. You still have the sword, you still have the shield, you still have the helmet. We're so proud of you.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Have you got the spirit of this place this morning, right from the word of testimony, for God really